Welcome to Heartcast, a podcast of Hospice of the Red River Valley. I'm your host, Dave Nillis.
Jennifer Messelt is a grief specialist with Hospice of the Red River Valley. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Jennifer, how do you talk to children about death and dying?
Well, the biggest thing I think is trying to keep it as simple as possible. Kids are concrete thinkers, so one of the big things we encourage people to do is use the words death and dying, not words like passed away, gone to sleep, they're in a better place. It's important just to call it what it is, which is, maybe it's grandpa died, or grandpa is dying and he's going to die.
Should kids attend a funeral following a death?
There's not really a really clear answer for that. I always say, moms and dads should kind of trust their gut with that. But the one kind of rule of thumb is it's important to let kids have a choice. But before you give them a choice, it's important that you paint a picture of what the funeral is going to look like, because this is probably going to be their first funeral, unless they've attended a lot of other ones, but they're going to be curious as to what to expect. So it's important to explain to them what's going to happen. I remember an 8-year-old niece of mine once said to me, we were going to a family funeral, and she said, "Tell me what's going to happen." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "I want to know from beginning to end." And so kids need to kind of have a picture painted for them of what it's going to look like. The other thing I say, too, is age 3 and under. If that's going to bring the parent or the guardian comfort, I say by all means bring the child. But at that age, they're too young to decide for themselves. And what we have found is that they oftentimes will kind of gauge the reaction of the parent or their caregiver. Let's say the caregiver's there, and every time somebody gives the caregiver a hug, they start to cry. That little one is going to realize that, and they're going to maybe, try to prevent that from happening, so want to be held, so that keeps the caregiver from being consoled by other people. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's one thing to think about with kids. And if you do decide to bring children, I think it's also important to have sort of like a backup plan or a place or somebody that can take the kids when if it gets to be too much for them.
Do you have any advice on how to manage a child at an actual service?
Yeah, I think it's sort of giving them the choice, if it is an open casket and they can view the body, you give them a choice, but ahead of time, let them know what it's going to look like. A lot of times kids get curious because they don't see the bottom half of the body, so it's important to say, you're going to see from waist up. Or if somebody's been cremated, sometimes that's hard for adults to understand. And again, we usually try to keep it really simple with kids, which is to say, they made their body really hot and then it turned to ashes. And sometimes, too, kids don't know what ashes are. This isn't really the time of cigarette smoking. Like when I was a little girl, I knew exactly what ashes were. And so if you can explain to them what that looks like, dirt or ashes, and then, explain that goes into a special container called an urn, and maybe pull up some pictures of urns online if you can ahead of time. But yeah, I think you let the kids take the lead. I think anytime you can expose them to anything that has to do with a funeral, the better. It's a part of life, and if they're in a secure environment, like with somebody that cares and loves for them, that's the best time for them to experience what death is going to look like.
How should you explain death and dying to a child?
I think it's important to use phrases like grandma's body stopped working or mom's body stopped working. If you say things like, grandma's sick and then grandma died, that might be the case on how it happened. But then what children will do is they'll sometimes think, well, what if, dad gets sick? Is he going to die? So being able to use just simple terms as, mom's body stopped working.
Jennifer, we live in a pretty stoic area of the country where we don't always express our feelings well. Why is it important for adults to express some of their grief feelings in front of children?
So I think it's important to express our feelings as adults, because kids, they're learning at this when they're young like that. They're learning as to what's right or not right, or what's appropriate or not appropriate. And so if they're seeing mom or dad trying to keep it together and be strong, they might too think that they have to do that same thing. And so I think when they can see that, dad can cry, and then, 2 days later, dad can get up and go to work. That's okay. It's okay to have reactions. Just because you have emotions or reactions to things doesn't mean that it's going to keep you from being able to do things. It just helps you to realize that it's good to release those reactions and emotions, and so therefore you can kind of move forward.
What are some signs a child is grieving, whether anticipatory or after a death?
So, it shows up differently in kids. A lot of times parents will think kids aren't grieving when they are just out playing, but that is one way that they process their grief. But it can show up in different ways. Like, say if they're in school, they might find it hard to concentrate. You might find that they're a little more irritable than usual. They might need a little bit more downtime or maybe a little bit more physical activity. It kind of depends, I guess, on the kid, and it doesn't show up with just tears. That's what I think we sometimes think, is that when somebody's grieving, they're going to be crying. So if my little guy isn't crying, that means he's not grieving, but that's not the case. I mean, it can show up with tummy aches or headaches. The other thing, too, I want to point out is that kids will continue to grieve at different milestones, depending on the loss of who died. But say if it was somebody like significant, a major person in their life, like a parent, that they died, say, when they were 5, or even any age, really. But like as they go through different milestones, maybe it's parents' night for a sporting event, or, big things like a wedding. But just maybe getting into college, those kind of things are milestones where kids will find themselves grieving again years later. And the other thing, too, for kids, I speak from my own personal experience. After my dad died, I didn't really realize that my own birthday would kind of hit me as hard as it did. But he died in March, and my birthday's in February, so it was almost a full year before I hit my next birthday. And my mom signed the card, "Just Love, Mom," and it was cute because she crossed out the we's and put I, because there's a lot of cards that aren't, maybe they've gotten better, that was 20-some years ago, but there was a lot of cards that didn't have just singular.
Jennifer, what types of grief support does Hospice of the Red River Valley offer youth?
So we offer a variety of different things to our youth. One of them is seasonal support through seasonal support classes. We also offer individual support, and we do offer support within schools. And so if you do want more information, you can sure contact Hospice of the Red River Valley.
Thank you for listening to Heartcast. For past episodes and more information about Hospice of the Red River Valley, visit hrrv.org.